Do you spend the majority of your time in your head? Do you struggle to stay here in the present? Do your daydreams not even feel good anymore, but you can't stop? I understand you because for years I was stuck maladaptive daydreaming and living in my head. And I've tried many different methods to try to stop maladaptive daydreaming, but this is a method that had me stop completely and actually put me on track to live a life that I actually want to be present for. But first, let's get into what maladaptive daydreaming even is. So maladaptive daydreaming is when you daydream for a significant amount of time. These daydreams are immersive, complex, emotionally charged, and they're also compelling oftentimes. For people that maladaptive daydream, sometimes they like to pace around while they daydream, or sometimes they like acting out their daydreams. You could be fully into it and not being able to multitask, or it can even overlap your daily life. So it's like kind of like augmented reality. However, the common thread between all of these variations and ways of doing it is the fact that you're not here. You're not in the present and you're not in your body. You are somewhere else. And this is usually used as a coping mechanism. And the thing is, there's a lot of shame and embarrassment someone can have if they do something like this. But in all honesty, it shouldn't be. Maladaptive daydreaming is just an action that is no longer aligned with you anymore and that you just rather not do. Now, since we got the definition out the way, let's talk about how I completely stopped maladaptive daydreaming after 10 years of doing it, because I have been doing it since I was a teenager, but I have stopped completely now. I know that's a really long time, but it just goes to show that if I can do it, you can do it too. So before we get into what I call the 3-phase framework and all my tips and insights from my experience, I just want to let you know that I am not a mental health professional. I'm purely speaking off of experience and also what worked for me. Okay, now let's get into the 3 phases. Now, phase 1 is pre-work. So in this phase, I'm not going to ask you to stop maladaptive daydreaming. I'm not going to ask you to stop cold turkey. I'm not going to ask you to even limit it, to be honest, but because it's the pre-stuff. Instead, I'm going to ask you to add some things into your routine. The first thing that you're going to add into your routine is mindfulness practices. For me in particular, the mindfulness practice that I chose to do was meditation. And during that time of meditation, I was not daydreaming at all. I was just following the guided meditations. And honestly, I would suggest doing it that way because of that reason, because you're just grounding yourself and you're just following directions. You have no room to daydream. There's actually a meditation that I found on YouTube that I will link down below that is maladaptive daydreaming specific. The second thing that you're going to do is journaling. I would suggest doing prompts on your ideal life, doing prompts on self-love, self-acceptance, and just regular journaling maybe at the end of the day where you express how you felt and recorded what you did for the day. And the third thing you're going to add to this routine is a hobby that requires your attention. For me, at this time, I was making videos on TikTok. And the thing that I like about video content creation in general is that it so grounds you. You are seeing yourself on camera and maybe you're editing yourself later, so you're super grounded. But if that's not your thing, you can paint, you can scrapbook, you can do photography. There's literally so many things. You can even go to events where other people are. If you're introverted, maybe that was an immediate no, but that's something you can put on the table. Just choose one and stick to a routine that you can do. Now, the last thing you're going to do in this phase, and this should be at the very end, is do a weekly audit. You're going to grab a notebook or a notes app, something to write down with, and write down every single thing that you do in a day. So like if you wake up at 7, you're going to write down woke up at 7, and if you scrolled on your phone for 15 minutes, you're going to put 7 to 7:15 scrolled on phone. And trust me, this is going to be like the most technical work you're going to have to do this entire process. Just trust me. Do this for 1 week. So I'm going to keep this part a secret of what happens when you do this. But when you get to this part, when you complete this weekly audit, tell me how your maladaptive daydreaming is like when you complete this phase in the comments below. So this is the end of the phase 1 pre-work phase. Now we're getting into phase 2 of the phase framework, which is the root cause. And this is the phase when I'm going to ask you to try to limit or completely stop maladaptive daydreaming. Now, don't be hard on yourself. If you slip back into it, it's fine. Just try to get back into the present each time you drift off somewhere. For me personally, what I would do when I find myself drifting, I would just try to latch on to one of are my senses, what am I seeing, what am I smelling, and all that kind of stuff. But again, don't beat yourself up for it. If you slip into it, just try to get back to the present the best you can. Also, at this point, I would suggest to stop consuming content that makes it feel relatable to maladaptive daydream, unless it's like videos like this that's trying to help you recover or get back to the present. So to kick off this third phase, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your daydreams and analyze them to see what your daydreams are fulfilling. Because oftentimes we are using daydreams as a coping mechanism or as an escape for reality that we don't want to be present for. And we can look at our daydreams and find clues into what we need and what we crave and what we desire. And this is true for all different sorts of daydreams. If you're daydreaming that you're a flying piece of toast, maybe your deep desire is to be free. Maybe it's to travel subconsciously. If you are daydreaming about something that might be negative, maybe you're using your daydreams to fulfill the need of releasing your emotions that you don't know how to. And to make this all the clearer, I'm going to use myself as an example. So in my daydreams, I was super educated. I had a wonderful sense of style. I constantly went to upscale events and parties. I was financially savvy and I knew everything about macroeconomics. This is literally so nerdy, but I literally don't care. And looking at the examples, I can see what my desires were, I could see what my needs were, and I could see what I cared about. I cared about my education. I cared about self-expression. I cared about success. And I cared about connection. If you're having trouble with analyzing your dreams yourself, what you could do is you can go to something like ChatGPT and just go into detail. It's literally nobody on the other end, okay? So you're just going to go into detail on all your maladaptive daydreams that you have, and then ask the question, like, what are my underlying needs from this? Can you analyze this for me? You can do that, or you can just do it manually like I did, but that's just an option if you're having trouble. So once you get your answers, hold on to it, okay? Keep that in mind, because we're going to need it later. So for the next step in this phase, we're going to recall some things from phase 1. So phase 1 was all about grounding ourselves in reality. So you did journaling prompts, you did journaling itself, you did the weekly audit. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the difference between your daydreams and reality. What's the difference between the life in your head and the life you're actually living? Now, here is the part where I would usually give up. Okay, this is the part where I'll be crying, boohoo crying, just go right back to my head. And I would do this because I thought there was no way I could bridge that gap or bring some of what I was getting in my daydreams and my real life. And I just want to take this second to say that that is not true, actually. And I understand what you might be thinking. Maybe you can't specifically be a mega dragon rider, and you probably can't be a giant flying piece of toast, but you can be free. You can be brave, you can be courageous, you can address your needs, you can address your feelings. We can get those underlying desires and needs met that we analyzed and we got from the first step in this phase. And I just really wanted to get that point in right now because we are going to get more into detail about this in phase 3, but I just wanted to let you know that now. And the last thing in this phase is to find someone who is living the closest thing to what your daydreams are like, or just somebody who possesses all those underlying needs or fulfillments that you want to have. And if this person is an influencer, you can watch them. If you see this person in real life, you could just be inspired by them and just know that it's available. So for example, going back to the dragon rider example that we said in the last phase, maybe you can look into horseback riding. Maybe you can look at fencing or even straight up medieval swords training. They have it out there. If you have similar daydreams to what I had, then you can look at women entrepreneurs. You can look at influencers or YouTubers like Tam Core, or read books. I know for me personally, there's this book called Dear Woman Founders, I believe. And I've been trying to get that book for a while, but I just haven't gotten around to it. But like reading stuff like that. So before we move on to the last phase, what I want you to do is I want you to update your ideal prompts that we did in the first phase. You can update it or you can start all over. Again, hold on to it. We're going to need it in phase 3. So now for phase 3, I don't know what the name of it was. See, I don't, sometimes I really don't know my handwriting. I think it's called reality changes or something. I don't know, something to do with reality. So anyway, this is going to be the reframing mind saturation phase. If you're doubting that you can have the dream in your head or having what your daydreams are fulfilling, in real life. And I'm talking about self-love, I'm talking about self-acceptance, I'm talking about genuine good friends, if that's what you want, releasing your emotions, and a million other things, right? This is the phase for you. Okay, we're going to be living in this phase for a minute. By the way, you shouldn't be skipping phases. This is the whole point. So the first step is to make a Pinterest board of everything that you want. If you haven't got an account, I suppose you could do it physically. Like I've seen people like cut up magazines and stuff like that, or maybe you can use like a similar site. But for me personally, I use Pinterest. So we want to find visual representations of what we actually want our life to be like, our real life to be like. It could be verbatim from your daydreams, or it could be, like I said, those underlying wants and needs, because I'm pretty sure you're not going to be like pinning pictures of toast and making a whole Pinterest board on toast. If that's what you want, great. But more than likely, you're going to find visual representations of your wants and needs and fulfillments that you want to have. And for that example of daydreaming about a flying piece of toast, maybe you will pin some pictures of being a pilot. I literally don't know what that underlying need could be, but that's basically what I'm trying to get at here. So just as a reminder, before we get into the next step, you should still be doing a lot of the things that we talked about in phase 1. So those hobbies, meditating, or no mindfulness practice of your choice, you should still be doing those habits. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be everything, but mindfulness and a grounding hobby, those two are non-negotiables. Step 2, you're going to add affirmation work. You can use guided videos, you can use your own affirmations, but I would suggest a baseline of affirmations to be about self-love, self-acceptance, self-esteem, and all of that foundational good stuff. Personally, I like using video guided affirmations. I do like 3 or 4 affirmation videos for about 21 to 30 days. Then I switch them out for other ones. And I also choose affirmations that fit my specific needs and maybe my goals for that month. So for example, if I'm not feeling very successful, then I'm going to add like a successful affirmation video. If I'm feeling like I'm not a very good public speaker, then I'll add a public speaking affirmation video. So that's just pretty much that step. So the next step is to take your daydream verbatim, or like we said before, those underlying needs. We're going to see what they are, and we're going to see what habits that we can do daily or weekly to get us there, to bridge the gap between the two. We're trying to get those fulfillments that we have from our daydreams or their daydreams themselves and bring that into our present reality. Listen, I get it. If you're like me and you have these crazy dreams of being like a global entrepreneur or whatever, it can feel like super impossible. If you feel like you want to be a dragon rider, you also might feel like it's impossible. If you want to have the sentiments or the underlying needs of your daydream of being a flying piece of toast, again, you might think this is a lot. Maybe I can't do it. Let me tell you what helps me. So I'm not sure why, but even with all of my self-doubt that I used to have, all my limiting beliefs that I used to have, I simply could not compute not having the life I was dreaming in my head. I just couldn't think of it never happening. And I think this is because of my belief of believing that dreams that are put in our heart and that feel innate to us that we can't get rid of, that we can't stop thinking about. I think of those things as things that were written for me to fulfill. And personally, when I pray for something to happen and I work towards it, I believe by the grace of God that it is going to happen, or something better is going to happen for me. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I do believe in human planning, because what we just did was human planning. But I would say never count out miracles, never count out divine guidance either. For example, in one of my last videos, I think it was the one on getting my culinary internship overseas, I didn't know how I was going to get that. I made a plan, okay? And honestly, this is something I daydreamed about. I daydreamed about having internships and stuff like that. But I was in a place where it was so difficult to do that. And this is what I did. I made a plan. I broke that down into habits, not habits, more like actions to do. And things just weren't working out for what I was trying to do. And then all of a sudden, my mom called me. She was like, hey, I went to this restaurant once and I saw the owner and I asked her if you could intern there, and she wants an interview. And I did it and I got it. And now I completed it. And a lot of my dreams and a lot of my aspirations, even this YouTube channel, I don't know what I'm doing here. Don't worry about trying to make things happen by yourself, because there is somebody guiding you. It's not your job or your business to figure out how it's going to happen. It's just your job to do what you can and what you can control. Anyway, to recap, just take a look at your goals, take a look at your daydreams, take a look at what your daydreams are fulfilling if you don't want your daydreams verbatim. Then break down those dreams into goals or habits or actions that you can take to bridge the gap and allow yourself to find your way to get there. And this last step is to think of the reason why you want to stop maladaptive daydreaming. And the reason why I wanted to stop maladaptive daydreaming was the realization that I wasn't just running away from everything that made me uncomfortable. I wasn't just running away from the reality that I didn't want to experience. I was also running away from the good things in reality that I did want to experience. I always thought that when I had the things that I wanted in my head, then I would stop daydreaming and I would just be present in real life. And the thing that concerned me is that I didn't stop. For example, I did get into one of the universities that I applied to, and I did get a scholarship. But you want to know what I did after I got that? I daydreamed. I still wanted to daydream. And I know this might be melodramatic or whatever, but I thought, would I still want to daydream after I have everything I wanted to? Maladaptive daydreaming was robbing me of my experience of my life. How would I feel when it's time to go and I realized I've daydreamed for half my life? And honestly, I can't even remember my teenage years that well anymore. And my message to you is that you are so much stronger than what is making you want to daydream. I started when I was much younger. I had just moved overseas to a new country, and the social scene wasn't as nice to me back then. I was riddled with self-esteem issues. I was homeschooled and I was alone. And there were so many things that were happening that made me struggle to be in the present. I had to dream up fantastic stories to keep me here. And I truly thought that I would never stop maladaptive daydreaming. And yet here I am making a video on how I managed to stop it completely. So a few days ago, I was walking outside and the air was so crisp and cool. And I felt so happy to be present enough to notice it. I feel happy when I'm struggling too, because I'm here to feel it. And I just want you to know that your daydreams, or whatever that's fulfilling, is available to you. Use me as an example. So when you're ready, it might not be today. For me, it took me a year. You're gonna say, I am no longer available for maladaptive daydreaming. Every single time you feel the urge to, you're gonna say, I am no longer available for maladaptive daydreaming. Let's see what I could do instead. And then you're gonna go from there. So this was Little Mint Baina. If you really like this type of content, I would highly suggest you subscribe. And if you really enjoyed this content, I would suggest checking out the And We Continued newsletter, which is my newsletter. It's like a hug sent to your inbox. It's full of inspiration. There's chat, there's community. It's just a fun time over there. So if you're interested, you can check it out. And also, if you're interested in listening to something, I have a podcast called Muslim Women Love Funds, and it's documenting my journey and all my lessons and insights towards achieving financial freedom as an African-American Muslim woman. Thank you for being here. I'm really privileged to make this video, and I'm really happy, and I hope that you found this useful. And I just can't wait to see where we go from here, because we're not messing around, okay? We're going full throttle. We're going full steam ahead. And I really believe that this year is going to be very transformational for a lot of us. We see you around, and I can't wait to see you next time in the next video.